Well, hey everyone, hope you're doing well. My name is Will Henke, and we're excited to have you on today. We're going to be talking about website security and identity theft, things of that sort. And basically what we're going to do is have two different presentations. One is going to be mine and talk a little bit about websites getting hacked, those sorts of things. And then we're going to talk to Rick, who he's going to talk more about identity theft, things of that sort. And he's got all the crazy cool information. You just have to sit through mine first to get to it. So speaking of Rick, we got Rick Shore on today. Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great, Will. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So we're excited to hear your good stuff, and we do have some freebies that we're going to give away at the end as well. And Rick, are you able to see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can turn this into something like that. How's that look?
That looks good.
And what do you see? Do you see the full presentation or the one with the next slide?
I just see the full presentation.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. Well, let's get this baby started, shall we? So I'm going to talk a little bit about websites that got hacked, and I'm going to give you an example, actually, of a site that I was dealing with that got hacked. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you about what happened, what we did about it, and then the most important part, how you can avoid it from happening to yourself. And especially for businesses, this is really important. So first of all, we'll talk about what happened. And I put the Blues logo up here because the Blues is a hockey team here in St. Louis, and typically 2/3 of the way through the season, this is what we're asking: what happened? Almost every year, we're not sure what happened, but something certainly did happen, and the season went bad. So that's my little joke there. But what happened is I was out to breakfast with my friend. This is my friend Steve and I. And we were out to breakfast and just chatting about different things. And one of the things that Steve was talking about was branding. He's a marketing guy, wanted to get a little bit more into some of the branding. And I said, oh, I know who you need to reach out to, and that's this lady named Cynthia Carell. She is spectacular at branding related things, that kind of stuff. So I said, you need to reach out to her. Hold on, I'll pull up her email or her website and get that to you right away. You know, when you're meeting with somebody, you want to give them that information as soon as you can. So I just typed in her name into the Google, as I call it, and this is what came up. Something that doesn't look great. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is not a good thing. I mean, obviously this is not Cynthia's correct homepage information. And the big part of it was Google actually said this site may be hacked. And of course it was. But this popped up, and so you know, what happened next? Well, I needed to do something about it. First of all, I couldn't give Steve the information that I wanted because I didn't have it on me and it wasn't on her website. So what I did is I contacted Cynthia and said, hey, I had breakfast with Steve this morning. Noticed your website had a bunch of weird characters and stuff, and here's an article on how to get that fixed. And being a smart person that Cynthia is, she basically replied back and said, I'd like to hire you to help me fix this, which was that's just extremely smart of her to do, I think. So anyway, let's back up a little bit. Cynthia's website is on a system called WordPress. And the way that WordPress works is in two parts. There's a bunch of files that go up onto the server, and then there's a database that actually integrates with those files. So when you're pulling up a website or a typical WordPress website, what's actually happening is that particular page is querying a whole bunch of those files to see how to build this page, and then it's querying the database to know what to plug in to each of these different spots. So for instance, welcome to our website. That's something in the database that pulls over and says, okay, what title do you want there? And then it goes back and it says, what paragraph do you want here? So there are a lot of pieces involved in building a website, or just generating one page on a website, really. So that's one thing that happened, and really the big part of this is that when there are different devices and different ways to get to a website, there are different layouts, quite honestly, for each different type of device that's looking at it. And of course, then it depends on if you turn it sideways and look at that device in a different way, it regenerates differently. So the other thing that's going on top of all that are all the plugins that you have on your website. So everybody's using all these different plugins to do all these crazy cool different things, right? Yoast and All-in-One are big SEO ones. Things like WordFence and Updraft are for backups and security and protection and those kind of things. So what happens is you have all these different pieces built together to keep your website running, right? So you have to keep all of these up to date. And with Cynthia, what we found out is she was actually 19 versions behind on her WordPress files and database updates. So this is obviously somewhat of an extreme example, but maybe a lot of businesses that don't realize they need to be updating these things, these are the actual numbers that Cynthia had. She had 6 theme updates to her website, which means the files that actually generate how it looks, things of that sort. And then each one of these plugins had updates of their own. So overall, she had 19 updates just to her WordPress files, but in theory, or in reality, she had 41 updates that she was behind. So that was not good. On top of all that, she didn't have any backups. And I know Rick's probably going to talk a little bit about backing up things today and being safe with some of your data. Peggy didn't have any of these. She didn't have any backups. So if you're going to take any notes today, here's the note you need to take: back up your stuff. Make sure you have backups that are being generated, on a regular basis. Secondly, it's very important that you pay attention to what is now called Search Console. It's a free tool from Google. It used to be called Webmaster Tools. And in fact, if you go to google.com/webmasters, you can set up your website there for free, and they will send you anything related anytime they come across any problems. Well, this is what happened to Cynthia. She didn't have this set up, so she didn't know her site was hacked. As soon as I went and set this up for her, we saw these kind of errors on her site. So at least Google knew about those. So we needed to get in there and start to fix these files and find out what got hacked, what got into, what did we need to do to fix it. So I jumped on Bluehost Chat, which is her hosting company, and I said, hey, we need a list of all the files that are hacked, and so that we can delete them or fix them or whatever needs to be done. And they gave us a list. So here's a list of all the files that need to be deleted, basically. So I went through and I deleted all those files, and sure enough, when I tried to get to those after that, it basically said this page is not found anymore. That's good. So I noticed that everything was all cleaned up. So I jumped back on the Bluehost Chat, said, hey, we've cleaned everything up. Can you turn our site back on and, let it regenerate all the correct titles and all that kind of stuff, which it did. And that was terrific. So the next thing we had to do is kind of funny, but we had to go pray to the Google gods to please let us back in. And this was the biggest piece of the puzzle, really. There's people out there looking for your website, and if they're coming across this website has been hacked, even though you jump on and you fix it or you get somebody to fix your website, it doesn't immediately fix itself in Google. So that message that says this website may be hacked can actually continue to show up for weeks, if not months afterwards. So we'll talk a little bit about what happened at the end here. But I want to talk about how you can avoid this from happening to you. Now, the big thing, obviously, that you can do is, as I already mentioned, back up your stuff. This is huge. If you're not running backups on a regular basis to your website, you definitely need to do that. Here are some different plugins that you can use for that. My favorite is Updraft or Backup Buddy. We use both of those for several clients. So those are really good options that will help you keep your website backed up on a regular basis. The other thing you can do is watch for updates in the back end of your website. So when you log into your website in the back end, typically some of these sorts of alerts pop up and say, hey, you need to update your website. Now, before you click this Please Update Now button, you need to make sure that you have a valid backup. Just in case something goes wrong, you have a way to revert back to the previous version. But you need to pay attention to those. At the same time, there's another place here. If you have updates to your theme, those will show up here under this updates column. And then, of course, each of the plugins have to be updated. And these things are random because they're all third-party creations. So there could be one today, and there could be another one in 10 minutes, and another one 2 days later. So they need to be updated, and you just click the little Update Now button here for each of those plugins that needs to be looked at. And those, like I said, could be very random. You need to kind of stay on top of those as well and make sure, of course, that you have any backups. Now, we do have a service for this. I'd love to talk to any of you, the attendees, about our WordPress Care program, and I'm happy to give you a discount off of that since you're attending this particular webinar. But this service goes in, runs all your backups, updates all your plugins, everything. And then I've also published a book called Defeating an Internet Boogeyman with my friend Mason and Adam. And this book goes into a lot more detail of all the different things that can happen to you and real world examples of things that have happened to other businesses and how you can avoid them, and some really good SEO tips and things like that to keep yourself from somebody else trying to rank for your particular business name, those sort of things. So one last thing. So the one thing that we had to do after getting Cynthia's website all fixed up was submit something called a reconsideration request. And sure enough, we did that. We did that, submitted it after we had everything done. And finally, we got this email back from Google saying, you know, your request was approved. Your website has been reset in our system. It's no longer showing as hacked. And the time that we got this, from the time we fixed her website to the time that we got this reconsideration request, was 5 weeks. So even though the website was fixed and running smoothly, it was 5 weeks from the time we submitted it to the time Google actually did something about it. So that's a little scary, especially if your website, if it's generating leads for you and all of a sudden it gets hacked, you're going to lose a ton of traffic during that particular phase of time, you know, between fixing it and getting it resubmitted to the search engine. So that's my presentation. I'm gonna pop over here to Rick and get him back on the call. I hope we didn't lose him. Rick, you there?
I am here.
All right. So kind of crazy, huh? You know, after you do all that work, it's still 5 or 6 weeks before Google even decides to pay attention to you.
Well, I think, Will, you complement a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about because you're an expert in that area of cyber world and how it works, and my expertise is in how to prevent people from misusing it. So I think there's a nice little synergy there.
Yeah, cool. Well, let me make you the presenter, and then you can pull up your screen, and hopefully it doesn't mute me. But let's hand this over to you. And then let me know if you get the message there. I think I might need to stop sharing. So now you should be able to. There we go.
Start sharing.
Go.
Okay. See if
Great
I can
technology.
share. I like to share. When I was a kid, I was taught, to share. So let's see if I
Really
can
nice
do
of you.
well. Yeah. Okay, so the screen, let me see if I can just get this. Can you just see the one main screen without the second slide?
I don't see anything yet, Rick.
Okay. Maybe I'm not a good sharer. Let's see. Oh, I got to hit share. Okay. All righty.
There we go.
Okay. Now we'll go from the beginning. How about that?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So thank you all for being on the webinar today. This is great. I think there's a lot of good information. I think it's certainly valuable information for everybody in America if anybody happens to use any digital techniques at all in their life. It's not really a fun topic. It's a little scary sometimes, but I think hopefully by the end of this you'll have some good ideas on how to do the best to prevent it. And let me just say, you can't totally prevent identity theft, but you can certainly make some take some logical steps to do the best job you can to keep the criminals from getting your information. And this is really one area of life where we're all equal. There's nobody that has any less, their information isn't any less desirable or their information isn't any more desirable. So when I talk to people about identity theft, I always ask them, what do you think identity theft is? And you can be thinking about that, but I think most of the time what I hear is people talk about their credit cards. People talk about maybe their bank accounts. And most of the time that's not really identity theft, that's just theft. And today it really only represents about 17% of what's termed identity theft. Just to bring it kind of close to home, St. Louis always seems to get ranked really high on bad things. And you'll see here in 2016, I think we've moved down in 2017 to maybe number 8. But in every major metropolitan city in the United States, St. Louis is number 4 per capita for rates of identity theft. I mean, we just seem to win all those great awards, and Missouri, the whole state of Missouri, is number 8. So it's not something that happens somewhere else. It's something that's happening in your backyard. So let's talk about some of the common forms of identity theft. I mean, there's a definition for you from the U.S. Department of Justice. And these are 5 of the main categories that we see today that represent the majority of identity theft. And I'm going to go through each one of them kind of briefly just to give you some idea. Your driver's license number and your driver's license is valuable to hackers. You really only have one driver's license number unless you move out of state and get a new driver's license. So that number is important, and all they have to do is put a different picture on that card. It's very easy to do. There's a town not too far from St. Louis called Wentzville, Missouri. There was a guy pulled over by the police in Wentzville for a traffic stop, and after a search of his vehicle, they found 38 driver's licenses that spanned 17 or 18 different states. Of course, they all had his picture on them, and they all had a different name on them, or perhaps even the name of that person's driver's license because it tied to their driver's license number. So which one do you think he's going to hand the police? And that's where the problems come in for the victim. You're going to get pulled over someday, and this happens all the time, and you ran a red light, or you ran a stop sign, or you're in a hurry to do something, and the policeman happens to pull you over, takes your driver's license, and then comes back to your car and puts you in handcuffs and arrests you for not appearing for a felony arrest for a DWI that you got in a state that you've probably never been in. Social Security is the keys to the kingdom. You know, how many Social Security numbers do you get? You get one. You get one Social Security number. And it's valuable because with that Social Security number, they can file false tax returns, and we see a lot of that. $6 billion have been paid by the Internal Revenue Service for fraudulent tax returns. They used to send you your refund with a prepaid credit card, which is, you know, like candy to the identity thieves because you can't track a prepaid credit card. And I know I can almost guarantee you that either someone on this call or someone you know has had notice from the IRS that said, well, you've already filed your taxes and we already sent you the refund. Because generally they're not going to file taxes in your name and do it in a way that they owe taxes. They're going to do it in a way that they get money back. And that takes a little while to unwind, sometimes up to 6 months to get your refund. If your spouse is anything like mine and I tell her we're getting a refund back from the government, she's already spent it before we ever get it back. Medical identity theft is really the biggest, well, let me just say it's the most valuable information for identity thieves. Why do you think that is? What would be important about medical records? Well, first of all, in 2015, medical providers had to switch to EMR systems, electronic medical records. So all those paper files that you see in that picture typically don't exist anymore. So they were rushed to get all their medical records on electronic files. And I mean, there's some good things about that because, you know, when you go somewhere else, someone, you know, you're in a hospital in another state, they should be able to pull up your medical records. But the hard thing about it was these companies, these providers, these physician offices, clinics, chiropractors, orthopedic clinics, etc., and even hospitals weren't really prepared well for it, so it didn't happen very efficiently. So that information is out there, and it's very valuable to the identity thief. It's valuable because it contains a lot of information. It contains what we call a FOLS package, F-U-L-T-Z, a FOLS package. And it's going to have your Social Security number, for sure. It's obviously going to have your medical ID. It's going to have your driver's license number because when you go to a hospital or to a physician's office, they usually take a photocopy of your driver's license. It's going to have your date of birth, which you only get one of those. That's important. It's going to have your address. It's going to have your medical identifiable number. You know, what healthcare organization do you get your medical care from? And today, even in America today, there's still a lot of people that don't have health care. And the ones that do have health care have high deductibles. You know, I think our deductible is like $6,000. So why not get a procedure done in somebody else's name? and let them get the bill and worry about it. All I have to do is go to the hospital and give them my medical ID, give them my fake driver's license, and they're more than happy to do a procedure on me because the healthcare company has approved it. There was a woman in Utah. She was a mother of 4 kids, and the Department of Family Services came to her door to take her children into protective custody because she had a baby, a drug-addicted baby in South Carolina, and she abandoned the baby. Well, I'm sure you know where this is going. She was never in South Carolina, and she certainly never just had a baby. So how do you untangle something like that? You know, it's just very complex, very time-consuming, obviously stressful. You know, somebody shows up at your door and wants to take your children away. I couldn't think of anything that would be more stressful than that. And it took a lot of time for her to get this resolved. She ended up using our services, and they expedited it, but it was still a headache for her. And the interesting thing is, when the Department of Family Services came into her home and did a kind of a walk through the house, they found some chemical, I think it was bleach, on a shelf that was too low. In other words, it was accessible to the children. The children could have reached up and gotten a hold of the bleach. And so now they go to her house every month and re-inspect it. So the criminal gets off and goes off on their own and still has not been caught, at least not that I'm aware of, since I guess the last 6 months was the latest I heard. But so the criminal goes off on their own, but the victim still remains with Department of Family Services coming to their home. And if somebody uses your medical records, goes to an emergency room or something, they're drug addicted, they have a different blood type than you, all of a sudden your medical record is changed. And with HIPAA regulations, it's really hard to go back in and undo those medical records. So it's a challenge. Criminal character fraud is also a big one because the people that are taking your identity and selling it, typically the ones that take it don't use it. They sell it because there is value to that information, to your PII, your personal identifiable information. But typically those people are not using your identity to make a donation to a charity. You know, they're generally using it for fraudulent activity. And we had a guy who was a real estate agent, and I don't know him, but I know the lady that works with him, and the FBI came into the real estate office and handcuffed him during a meeting. I mean, how embarrassing is that? Took him out of the meeting, and it turned out that they were arresting him for putting pornographic material, children's pornographic material, on his website. It wasn't him, but, you know, it's really the only crime that I know that you're guilty until proven innocence. You have to prove who you are because somebody else is already you. And the financial piece we talked a little bit about. I mean, it's still a pain, it's still a problem. You know, they deplete your accounts, they run up credit card bills, they can ruin your credit history. But typically the banks and the credit providers are pretty much on top of that. You can get your credit card stopped, you can get the money refunded to you or taken off of your bill. 401ks and IRAs are still valuable targets. I mean, they're valuable because it's a one-time hit. They can clean that out, but that information also has additional records that has an ongoing value. And we're seeing, you know, most of you probably now have that chip on your credit card, and the chip was supposed to reduce the theft of credit card information, and I think it's done somewhat of a job on that, but it's also opened up a whole new opportunity because those credit card readers that you stick your card into, you can buy one of those for about $45. And you can turn up the amplification on it. Now, hopefully I'm not giving anybody any ideas on how they can go out and become a criminal, but you can turn up the amplification on them, and you can walk through a crowd and pick up digital information off of people's credit cards. And that's a form of phishing and scamming that's going on today. So they can get that information, and people that I talk to have their information stolen, and it's like, where did they get it? And I just mentioned about 20 different areas where they could have gotten it. So it's really hard to tell sometimes where people get your information. So where it is everywhere. You know, real estate deeds, medical records, social security number, your name. I mean, your name is the most important thing on here. We take a long time to build a reputation, whether we're a business or an individual. And your name, my dad told me when I was pretty young that, you know, Rick, you can have a lot of assets, you can have a lot of things, you can get a lot of degrees, but the most important thing is going to be your name. You know, are you trustworthy? Are you honorable? Can people, are you ethical? Can people take what you say to be true? So you build a reputation around your name. And it can be, you know, reputations take a long time to build, and they take a short time to really destroy. I mean, the guy that was arrested for child pornography on his website, I mean, even though he didn't do it, I mean, it's going to take him some time because those kind of rumors spread pretty quick, and then he's got to go around telling everybody he didn't do it. And, of course, every criminal says they don't do it. So the one thing that's not on here that I do want to mention to you on this slide is social media. So social media is becoming more and more an attractive pathway for criminals to get information on you. So be careful what you put on social media. It is amazing to me all the information that is posted on there. And you can go on there, you can look up somebody, and you can find out a lot about them, where they live, what their kids' names are, what their dog's name is, you know, probably some good pictures that you could replicate and make a new driver's license out of. So they recommend you always have a picture with someone else in there. You're in a group on your Facebook account or on some of your other social media accounts. And of course, we've heard a lot about Facebook, and they're selling or sharing personal information with other companies that use that personal information to target sales and target activities. So it's a little tough. One area that is scary to me personally, because I've got like 1,000 kids, is children's identity theft. So the timing of this discussion might be pretty good because all the kids are going back to school, and you've given them their crayons and their backpacks, but, you know, have you checked their credit report? I stole this from the Kim Commandos show. If anybody ever watches that or tunes into that, that's pretty amazing. She does a great job of talking about the threat that we face today in America for identity theft. And we had 1.3 million children. I mean, this is reported, okay, 1.3 million children had their identity stolen in 2017. That doesn't mean that was all, because those are the ones that were reported. And already this year, as of the end of July, there's been 1 million that have been reported. So, you know, you do the numbers, it's probably going to be well past 2 million this year. under the age of 8. They produce a synthetic identity of that person, so they can take the children's social security number, which they get at birth, by the way. As soon as they're born, they're given a social security number. And who checks their child's credit report? I mean, nobody. So it's like candy to a criminal ID thief. They can take that social security number, they can pair it up with other names, they can put different addresses on there, and all of a sudden they've got this person that has no bad credit. And, you know, there's tons of stories of these kids when they get older that they've got huge bills. A lot of times it shows up when they're applying for student loans when they're going to college. And it turns out that they have a lot of property, they own property, they've had a couple of foreclosures in their name, you know, and that can take years for the common person to try and unravel. And sometimes I can say it's almost impossible to unravel by yourself. Okay, what do they do with this information? Okay, why would anybody steal like thousands of records? Well, there's a place called the dark web. You can't get to it through your browsers. Google, Chrome won't take you there. None of the other browsers that we typically use will take you there. You can get a browser called Tor, and that will allow you access to the dark web, and that's where they sell this information. And it's like, if you ever go on there, and I don't recommend it, it's like Amazon. I mean, there's all the information, you know, what do you want? What do you want? You can search for this, you can search for that. You can buy the Fulls packages, which contain a whole lot of information on different individuals. And then the sellers of this information get rankings, you know, 4-star, 5-star rankings. So they rise to the top of the search engine because they have the best rankings. And so now some of them, I mean, it's really becoming a pretty elaborate marketing program where they're offering different freebies. Like if you buy 10 of my Fulls packages today, we're going to give you a free how-to guide, you know, that could cover different aspects of identity theft. Like an example would be how to use a fraudulent credit card without being detected. So these guys are getting smarter, a lot smarter. And I mean, they trick the best of us. You know, I fell for something myself that it just seemed so legitimate to me. And I clicked on it, and I wish I never would have. So what do they sell these things for? You know, your social is pretty cheap. You can buy a social security number for $1. So people typically will buy a couple thousand social security numbers. The most expensive ones on this slide that you see are going to be passports. You know, people still want to get into this country. As much as we complain about some of the things going on in the U.S., it's still the most desirable country for a lot of people that are overseas, and also people that can't travel outside of the U.S. They can buy a passport on the dark web. And then the medical records you see are very expensive. Sometimes they can go up to $5,000, and that's why we've seen such big breaches for people like Anthem. You know, right here in St. Louis, BJC Healthcare was breached. And they take those records and they hold them for ransom. It's called ransomware. So, you know, to get the records back, and this goes back to what Will said about backing up your information. To get the records back, you have to pay the perpetrator to restore your practice. I mean, there was a hospital down in, small hospital just recently. I mean, there's so many examples, but I try and keep them recent. It was down in, where was it? Like a town I'm there. Oh, Harrisonville, Missouri. Cass Regional Hospital in Harrisonville, Missouri. So they were shut down because they locked up their system. They froze all their medical records and stole them, and they couldn't get to them. And they really had to stop taking patients. They had to reroute patients. They had to take care of and start doing everything by hand for the patients that were in the hospital. They even transported some of the patients out of the hospital. I mean, that's a huge impact on a business. And they finally got him back and got back into shape, but they had to pay thousands of dollars to retrieve all their medical records. So we talked a little bit about the impact on the victims. I think from some of the examples I gave you, you could see what this can do to you or a family member or an employee. You know, depending upon how long it takes you to get this fixed, you know, you might have problems securing loans. Some of that stuff that gets on your credit record takes a long time to get it off. People are calling you for bills to pay that you've never even, or you never created the bill, because they're going to change your address, so you're not getting notifications that there's something done in your name. So now the collectors are trying to chase you down. Arrested for crimes, being pulled over, somebody's already committed a crime in your name. Background check, so you're trying to get a job. I mean, it goes on and on. Worry and stress is putting it mildly. There's been cases of suicide from victims of identity theft because it disrupted their life so severely that they just didn't know how they were going to ever get out of it, and they chose to take their own life. And for our employers, you know, there's going to be times when people can't get to work because they're trying to fix this during business hours. And they don't show up for work, or they call in sick. It takes on average, if you're handling this by yourself, it can take on average 200 hours to fix your identity. So I don't know about you, but I don't have 200 hours to spare for something that, you know, all of a sudden happens, and it's always going to happen at the wrong time. The business has impacts if this happens to the business itself, or if it happens to the employee. We mentioned absenteeism. And I don't even know if this is a word. Maybe I should look it up, but presenteeism. So you're there, you're on the job, but you're not really mentally there. You know, you're doing what you can to get by because you don't have any more PTO time or time off. You don't want to use your vacation time to fix this tragedy. So you're kind of there, but any opportunity you get, you're going to be on your phone trying to sort through who to call, what to do, what are they going to do for me, how do I fix this, etc.
Hey, Rick.
Criminal civil liability, people can get involved with a lot of different crimes that are going to be committed under their name. If your business is hacked, you know, your customer relations are impacted. You know, we've all heard of some of the recent ones. Uber, 57 million people potentially affected. So when you get into an Uber now, you're kind of wondering, you know, what's going to happen to my information. I think I mentioned Anthem. They had to give everybody identity theft monitoring, which does absolutely nothing for them. Yahoo, some of you heard of that. They received the first SEC cyber disclosure enforcement penalty of $35 million But when they were hacked, it took 2 years before they disclosed that they were hacked and that personal data was over 500 million users. Target, Macy's, Ticketmaster, Adidas, Allscripts had to stop producing scripts for over a week. Facebook we talked about. Google's now, you've probably heard, are permitting third parties to actually read your emails because their computers cannot discern everything that's in the email. So now they're actually having humans read the emails. So it just doesn't, you just have a hard time doing business with some of the people that your data isn't safe with. It could prevent downtime, and then that reputation is something we talked about, just like your name, that could be damaged along with your brand. And maybe that's when you need Cynthia Carell to get your brand back in shape. So what do you do? So just some quick protection tips, and we're going to wrap this up. Make IT security a priority in your business, not just a little checkbox. Make sure everybody doesn't have access to all the sensitive data. Limit that to key people. Make education and training ongoing. I provide training and education for employee groups, and I'm happy to do that at no charge, just to get this awareness out there, just to help them understand tips and things they can do on the job. Have a plan. Make sure if somebody's leaving the company that you remove access to their information. Get cyber liability coverage. So if in the event you're sued or other crises occur because of your information being compromised, you have some kind of financial protection on that. And offer identity theft coverage for employees. The IRS is really behind that now, and if the employer happens to pay for it, for us, we offer it as a voluntary benefit or as an employer-paid benefit. But if the employer pays for it, it's now a non-taxable benefit. Society of Human Resource Management said that they're seeing that as the biggest growth right now in employee benefits. So if you're an employer, I would strongly recommend you consider that. If you're an employee, you might want to talk to your employer about what they might think about taking a look at this and seeing if it could at least be offered to the employees. Because if the employees are protected, the business is protected. So what can you do for yourself? Look at your credit report. So there's 3 credit reporting agencies, right? Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And I have on my calendar, like every 4 months, I pull my credit report down from not each one of them, but one of them, because you can get a free credit report every year. So every 4 months, and that repeats sequentially every year, I can get a credit report from one of those credit agencies for free. And there's a lot of places you can go for credit reports, but this is the legitimate one, annualcreditreport.com. Shred your junk mail, credit card offers. Dumpster diving is still a way that people can get access to your information. Shredders are cheap. Buy one and use it. Don't carry your social security card around with you. They used to have that as your medical identification number for people that were on Social Security, but now they've changed that. So the Social Security cards, everybody's getting new Social Security cards that does not have their Social Security number on it. Or they're getting Medicare cards, that don't have their Social Security number on it. Don't carry extra credit cards with you. Carry just what you need. Don't use your debit cards online because if you use a credit card, you'll see in your statement that you had a charge there that you can dispute, and then you could pay your credit card bill short while they work out that dispute. But if you use a debit card, that's cash right out of your account. And legally, the banks have up to 60 days to put that cash back in there. Be careful over the phone. They're really good at calling somebody and saying, you know, that this is their niece in jail and they need money wired. The grandma needs to wire some money to get their granddaughter out of jail, and that's been very effective. You're going to see more two-party or two-factor authorizations. I think the passwords are going to start to go away, especially in the financial industry, where you're going to enter some personal information, then they're going to send you a text with a code so that you can get into your account. And I think we mentioned about being on social media. The protection I talked about, there's 3 different kinds. There's a kind that reimburses you. You know, insurance companies offer that for the money you spend to restore your identity. Okay, so you got to spend it, and then you got to prove that you spent it to restore the identity. Resolution, we hear a lot of advertising about will resolve your identity. They get a counselor to work with you, but you kind of get a kit in the mail and you still spend hours of time. And then there's restoration, full restoration, where a licensed private investigator does a restoration for you. You fill out a limited power of attorney, because the only way somebody can work on your behalf and get into your medical records, get into your financial records, is to have a power of attorney. So you file a police report and you empower that investigator. So really, sorry for the bad news, but I think maybe some of this might be of value to you, and certainly to your family, because they're going after even children. I'm happy to do any of these presentations for any of your employees or any of your groups or your chamber organizations or any kind of group that you might be involved in. That's my contact information. Feel free to call me or email me at any time. And I just really appreciate everybody's attention here today.
Cool. Thank you, Rick. That was terrific. Really good. So let's see if I can't make myself the presenter again here. And, all right, can you see my screen here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, look at there. It went all the way back to the beginning. That isn't what I wanted to happen. Luckily, we can get through it pretty quickly. All right. Wanted to make you a special offer today for everybody that joined in. I'm more than happy to give you a copy of my book, Kindle version of the book. You can just download it right on your phone or on any device that you want to look at it. And Rick, you have a special app that people can get that has a bunch of legal questionnaires and some different documents, things of that sort, right?
Yes, anybody that's interested in that, if they would just send us your contact information. I like to send the app to your phone, text it to your phone. That way you can just download it directly on your app. It is a Legal Shield app, so the company that sponsors this is Legal Shield because identity theft is a legal problem, but it's going to give you access to a lot of forms, buy-sell agreements. You can customize your own forms. You can ask any legal question, and it's populated now with over 2,000 common legal questions that we seem to get, and it's going to be, the forms are going to be based upon the state in which you reside, because every state has different laws. So it's really cool and it's really useful and it's free. So if you're interested, send us your information. I'd love to send it to you.
Yeah, I've put the link down there, cf.redcanoemedia.com/security. We'll also send this link out in an email after the webinar's over. I did want to get into a couple questions, if that's okay. Let's see what we had a couple different questions come through. One is, how often should I update my website? So I was talking specifically about WordPress, And the WordPress core files are updated a couple times a year. Plugins, on the other hand, are updated very often, sometimes every day. So typically what we tell people is at least once a week you need to be going in and updating these items. And of course, running backups. The other question I always get is around how often should I back up my site? And really for if your website is a brochure type website and maybe it's not you're not adding a bunch of data to it all the time, it's just a brochure website, then once a week is probably just fine. If you need to, if you're in like an e-commerce situation, let's say, then it may be that you need to update it more often, maybe even daily. You need to be running these backups and these updates. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And Rick, I think I got some questions on there for you as well. One thing I did not hear you mention with some of those companies that you were talking about, I didn't hear you say anything about Equifax. And I know that's the one everybody was talking about here a couple months back.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I have a question for you, Will. What in the world is that on your screen?
That is from a movie called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the whole purpose of the movie was the ultimate question. See how that ties in there? They were asking that computer what was the answer to the ultimate question.
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, so thanks. I'm looking it up. What is this? Where did he get this? Okay, so Equifax. Yeah, so, there's 3 credit bureaus we mentioned, and Equifax was the biggest breach. There's a new recent one that not a lot of people know about yet. But Equifax, when they reported it, they reported 145.5 million Americans. Data was stolen. And now it's 170 million that they're saying had been compromised. And, there's a lot of information about you on Equifax: names, address, date of birth, socials, driver license numbers, tax identity numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, credit card information, because everything you ever did credit-wise is going to be on there. And the interesting thing about it was that the Equifax, if anybody ever saw the interview from who's the senator in Massachusetts? Can't think of her name right now. I'm just blanking on it, but she just tore this CEO up because he had apparently stated in a board meeting that a breach was a revenue generator for them.
Oh.
And so what they do is two things. It was a revenue generator, and then several of the senior executives sold stock before they announced to the public that they were breached.
Wow.
So that's not a good thing. So what they did was then they offered free credit monitoring. So you put your credit card in there, and then they give you free credit monitoring from LifeLock, and then they had over 7 million people sign up for that. It's free for a year, and then after a year it starts billing you. So if 10% of the people just kind of let it ride, that's 700,000 new credit monitoring people that they're getting, that they're able to bill for. So, yeah, it was bad.
That's a bit nutty.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Does your company, Legal Shield, offer identity theft protection? And if so, what is the cost on that?
We do, Will. We offer a product called ID Shield. So Legal Shield is a 45-year-old company, and we partnered with the biggest risk mitigation cybersecurity company in the world called Kroll. People can Google that. It's Kroll, and they're in 35 different countries. They have several different locations in the U.S., and we market their consumer product. And they came to us because in 2003, they were realizing that identity theft was a criminal matter, and so that their victims had to have legal representation in many different situations. And we were the only business out there that had dedicated law firms in every state, and we're the biggest provider of legal services in the U.S. So it's been a great partnership, and the access to them is very affordable for a family, unlimited number of people. Well, actually, I think it's up to 8 children and the spouse. They'll monitor all their information and provide complete restoration with a $5 million guarantee. So you just call them, you tell them the problem, they go to work for you, you fill out a limited power of attorney, you file a police report, and you go about your life while they untangle the web that's been created. So it's $24.95 for that program for families. And if it's an employee benefit, if we're able to offer it through the employer, it's only $18.95 per month. And with unlimited access to these private investigators, one-to-one, you get a guy, you know his name, you have his phone number, and he's the one you work with through the whole process. And we don't quit until you're satisfied. So thank you for that question.
Well, that's terrific. That's really cool. Well, Rick, I think we're gonna close it up. We're just over an hour, and just wanted to make sure everybody knew about the offer once again. You can go to cf.redcanoemedia.com/security, and I'll shoot you a copy of the book. Rick, you are going to just text the link to the free app.
Yes.
Right to their phone, and then they can just download it right away. So that will work out well. And Rick, I really appreciate you being on today. I think we had tons of good information, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Will. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Everybody take care. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.